Well, hello there, and thanks for listening in to Henderson Performance Radio. My name is Zach Henderson, and today you get to hear a conversation with Miss Julie Booher. Julie is a former intern and coach at the world-famous Strength Camp Gym in St. Petersburg, Florida, and today is growing her message of strength from Canada, of all places, and we will get into just how she ended up there. This was a really fun one for me. We talk a lot about coaching, what it means to coach both mind, body, and spirit, the sometimes perils of social media, and her story on navigating some pretty tough life choices in recent history. And with that, here is Julie. All right, we are on the line with Julie Booher. How you doing today, Julie?
I'm great. How are you?
Very well, very well. And Julie and I met in passing, somewhat briefly. It must have been approximately 2 years ago,
hmm
maybe just over 2 years ago,
Yeah.
at the Strength Camp Gym for an Elliott Hulse event. And little did I know that I would be seeing you again and again and again, along with millions of other people, on the Strength Camp YouTube channel. But
Yes.
taking us back to just a little bit before that, what were you up to right before that event?
Yeah. So it's crazy. We were kind of talking about right before we got on the podcast about how things serendipitously line up without you having any expectation of how things are going to turn out. So back in September of 2015, which is right before I attended the event that you were talking about, the non-job summit, I was working at an advertising agency full time as a content writer. It was a typical 9 to 5 job. And while I liked it, I was also doing personal training, group exercise, all of that on the side. And that was what I was really passionate about. I had a blog and I just really enjoyed sharing fitness content with people. So that I was lucky in the fact that it got so big that I was able to have the choice. I was at a crossroads of either staying at my full-time advertising job or taking the leap of faith. I was only 23 at the time, so what do I have to lose? That was kind of my mentality. So I just decided to take the leap of faith. I left my full-time job in advertising in September of 2015. And I think honestly, it was probably 2 or 3 days later where I was on YouTube searching for something fitness related, found Elliott Hulse, the guy who owned the gym, Strength Camp, and binge watched his videos. I'm not even kidding, Zach. I probably sat there for 3 days just watching all of his videos, as I'm sure so many people do with Elliott, because he's just so interesting to watch.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I had no expectation of ever working there, but I saw a Facebook ad pop up that said there was an event in Tampa called the Non-Job Summit, and it was all about turning your passion into profit. So I was like, that's what I'm trying to do, turn my passion into profit. So maybe I should go. And it turns out it was only 2 hours away from my house. And just a side note about how serendipitous this was, I think to attend the event, it was $550, okay? And I had been training clients and whatever. I usually accepted checks from them. But one of my clients from months and months before that, she was the only person to ever pay me like a large amount of money in cash. And I put it away in an envelope just for no particular reason at all until that day when I was watching the video, found out about non-jobs and found $600 in the envelope in cash. That was one of my things. I was like, how am I going to pay $600? I just left my job. I don't really want to spend the money. And I was like, oh my God. I was crying. I was like, I gotta go. I called my friend. I was like, we're going. So yeah, that was pretty much it. And then after the non-job summit, met a bunch of the guys who work for Strength Camp, all the coaches. I met Elliot there. Elliot actually asked me to go to lunch 2 months later, which is where I found out about the internship, and then started working there in January of 2016. So yeah, it was just a crazy couple months. And honestly, I went from expecting to go full force into my own business, but little did I know I would take this new detour and work for Strength Camp for almost a year, pretty much a year. So yeah, crazy turn of events that I did not expect, but it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess kind of one of the cliche questions would be from there, what was it like getting on board with the team and having, the camera turned on you?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. When I first got there, so nobody knows when you go there whether or not you're going to get hired. So you just go into it expecting it to be a 3 month internship. It's unpaid and they don't pay for room and board or anything. So it's kind of one of those situations where you either have to have money saved up or you just got to make it work somehow. And as an entrepreneur, I was kind of creative in the way that I was always resourceful and knew how to make ends meet, even when there was no opportunity to make money. So, going into it, I just expected to stay for the 3 months and then go back to Orlando, and which is where I was from, and just start doing my business full time and go full force into that. So, as I was completing the internship at Strength Camp, I got really close to all the guys that work there. And we have interns, just so anybody who's listening to this knows, interns go through Strength Camp all the time. We have like two or three new interns from all over the world every 3 months, and then we get new ones, and then we get new ones. So the fact that I even stayed, I was like the first person to stay after Mark and Shannon, who originally were like the only two, and then there was like back end people. But yeah, it was crazy because I think what differentiated me from other interns that had come through is that I took initiative in the sense that I started a yoga program while I was there, and I started taking initiative to write newsletters, and I went kind of above and beyond just the normal strength and conditioning coach duties. And yeah, in terms of like being on camera, that was really intimidating because first of all, it's all guys that work at the gym and I was the only girl. So, and people at that point were so used to watching Elliot on the YouTube channel that when it kind of started shifting to more of Shannon and Mark and Chris, people weren't happy. They were like, "Where's Elliot? We want Elliot back." So then to also throw a female into the mix, and I wasn't on that many videos compared to the guys, but it wasn't, some of it was received well, but I remember doing, we did coached videos where it was pretty much the coaches being followed around with a microphone on.
Hmm.
And some of the comments, oh my God, I will never read YouTube comments again because they were so mean. But it was funny. It was cool though. It was a good experience to be exposed to such a large audience of people. And just I've met friends through that too. Like girls have found my Instagram and been like, "I found you on the Strength Camp channel," which is amazing and so much better than I could have ever expected. So all in all, it was a wonderful experience. Like I said, I didn't expect to get hired, but I kind of knew towards the end of the 3 months, I was like, okay, there's probably something that's going to come of this, and I'm going to take this opportunity while I have it.
So cool. So
Yeah,
cool.
it's fun.
Especially, considering that you have that presence on a YouTube channel that, let's face it, is kind of, I would assume, kind of go down in history as one of
Yeah,
like the most
best.
robust fitness, pieces of a sequence of fitness content that like the internet
Yeah,
has ever seen. Obviously until something way bigger than YouTube comes around,
right.
the Strength Camp YouTube channel is like,
Huge.
yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, people would come into the gym. So there were two types of people that came to train at Strength Camp. There were the people that knew and loved Elliot and would come from anywhere all over the world to work out there. And then there was people in the strength or in St. Petersburg, which is where the gym is located, that had no idea that who Elliot was or that we even had a YouTube channel. So then there would be people coming in for their first day of class because we offered a 2 week free trial, and there'd be like cameras following people around. I was like, sorry, it's not usually like this. I promise you're not going to be on camera 24/7. So yeah, it was really funny.
And obviously from there, you got to meet and work pretty closely with Mr. Mark Novak.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Now, I had the pleasure of chatting with him for probably 10 or 15 minutes at the event. Struck
Mm,
me as a super nice guy,
he's the
obviously
best.
obviously humble, awesome dude, and as we all well know now, there was some love that blossomed on the
Yeah.
gym floor.
Oh
So,
yeah.
how did that transpire?
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so for the first 3 months that I worked there, because the internship is 3 months long, there was no romantic connection at all. So it wasn't like I was interning and he was trying to hit on me or anything. It was actually quite the opposite. Well, not like I was trying to hit on him either, but we would just I was close with all the guys because I was the only girl. So I would naturally hang out with a lot of guys all the time. And I've kind of been like that growing up too, where I've just gotten along better with males because there's not as much drama, you know? So, yeah, it wasn't like a weird thing. We would all hang out all the time. But Mark and I think we developed a connection because he coached the night classes. So I would work a few mornings and a few nights. And naturally, after the night classes, as I'm sure it probably happens in your gym, people just hang out and talk for a while. So Mark and I just started talking longer and longer. And then we went to a meditation camp. Elliot hosts these meditation camps now called grounding camps, which if any of you listening have the opportunity, you should 100% go because it's awesome. But there we kind of, I think that was like a shift where that was right when my internship was ending. We went to the meditation camp. I kind of knew at that point I was going to get hired on full time, but I wasn't 100% sure. And yeah, it just kind of, I think we kind of just expressed interest in each other finally. And yeah, it just went from there. And then honestly, since we got back from the meditation camp, we had hung out every single day, probably for however long we've been together now. So with
Wow.
the exception of when he got stuck in Canada, but we can talk about that later.
Well, I think now might be as good of a time as any. So, obviously, I just saw some of the social media rumblings that
Yeah.
he got. I don't know the full situation, and feel free to chat as much or as little as you want to about it. But yeah, it was like the next thing you know, you see these
Mm,
signs, free Mark.
yeah.
So what?
Oh,
So what happens?
so I'll keep a really long story short. But essentially, we came back to Canada to visit his family in December, and we were just here for Christmas. And then we had intentions of coming back on January 1st, back to St. Pete, where we both worked at Strength Camp. And I was actually running this huge New Year's challenge that we were hosting where we got like 60 new people into the gym and I was in charge of all of it. And Mark was going to be an integral part of helping out with that as well. So on January 1st, we went from, Canada, we went to the airport. And because his visa papers were not up to date, he was not able to go back to America, which through 100, like, oh my God, that completely changed the trajectory of everything in both of our lives because I was just offered a position as director of marketing at Strength Camp at that point. So I kind of was stuck in this pickle. I'm like, okay, at that point we weren't even engaged or married or anything. I was just like, okay, I don't know, do I follow this guy or do I keep working for Strength Camp? What do I do? And yeah, it was kind of hard because that day I had to go back on the plane by myself, not knowing anything. We were supposed to move into a new place the following week, and I was supposed to take this position as director of marketing. And he was going to keep working at Strength Camp until he decided to become a firefighter, which was in his plan all along, by the way. And so, yeah, it was just a complete change of events, and it made me have to really look hard at my life and say, okay, what is really in alignment with what I want to do with my life? Do I want to stay at Strength Camp? Do I want to move to Canada? Because that was a possibility at the time, which has now come to fruition. Do I want to go back to Orlando and just start my life there? Because that was where my whole personal training client base was originally anyway. So yeah, it was kind of just this fork in the road where I was like, oh, well, I guess everything's about to change right now. And it definitely did.
Wow. So how did the next few steps come about? I guess obviously leading to you guys fully committing to each other and
Right.
going up to
Yeah,
Canada.
so the day that he got stuck was probably one of the worst and the best days of my life in the sense that I couldn't even talk to him because he got sent to secondary customs. I wasn't allowed to see him or anything. So I kind of had to just get on a plane and be like, well, I hope this is what he wants me to do because, I can't really stay here. Our flight was leaving in 30 minutes. And I was just like sobbing on the airplane, so dramatic. But yeah, so I kind of made the decision to just take a little bit of time for myself. This is what I do in any situation where I need to make major life changes is I get a hotel or Airbnb by the beach. So that's what I did. I was like, I just need to figure this out for my own without the outside, opinion of Mark, because at this point he was only my boyfriend. So, it's a much larger commitment when you're either engaged or married to somebody to like follow them around and do whatever. But I've always been a very independent person that wants to make my own decisions because I want to make them, not because it's what I should do or I should stay at this job or I should go with this guy or do whatever. So just did some soul searching and I really came to the conclusion that I was ready to leave strength camp, even though it was an amazing experience. I think what it showed me was that in my heart, I've always been kind of motivated to speak my own message. And when I was with Strength Camp, I was, under the umbrella of Strength Camp. And while I loved being exposed to their audience, a lot of the audience of Strength Camp is boys, like teenage boys, young adults, young adult men, and probably 3% of the population that watches the videos is women. And my passion is connecting with women, talking to women. And I wanted more of a platform to do that without it looking like I was trying to do my own thing on the side or, like do shady stuff outside of strength camp. I just want to share my message with as many women as possible. So that was really the deciding factor for me. How can I do that? And how can I serve the world and women in general in the best way that I know is possible? And the only way that I could do that is by leaving strength camp, even though it was so hard. Like I loved it so much. But what I mean by January 1st being the best and worst day, it was the worst because it forced me to kind of close down one chapter of my life and abruptly open a new one. But that was also the best thing that could have ever happened because I could have stayed in a situation for many more years than my heart was telling me to had that dramatic event not happened.
Right. And if we've learned anything from Elliot Hulse himself, it's you got to go with your instincts.
Your heart. Yeah.
And do what you know in your heart is best.
Right. And I feel like that's the thing too. It's not just about me and what I want. It's what is Strength Camp, their mission and their brand, which I am fully 100% behind. But if I'm not committing myself 100% and there's part of me that wants to do my own thing and speak my voice to women and do all this stuff, yes, I could technically kind of do it under the Strength Camp umbrella, but with their mission is moving so fast, it's full force ahead. Like they're just taking over the world. They're opening gyms all over the world. And I couldn't see myself like traveling around and helping people open gyms and do all of that. So it was just a point where it was there's nothing wrong with the gym. Like I absolutely loved it there, but it was just one of those really hard, like heart-wrenching decisions of this is what my intuition is telling me. And I've always followed my intuition, even though it might go against what some people would argue is more logical.
Absolutely. Well, and now you're a couple more steps down that path of coming into your own with your own messaging and your own platform. So in a nutshell, what if somebody's not familiar with your material or your writings or your social media, your website, what is it that's at the core of your messaging?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I'm actually fine-tuning it and finding my own voice in the industry because as we talked about before the podcast started, it's very easy as a fitness coach to just get wrapped up in the whole weight loss. Like, I'm going to teach you how to lose weight and track macros and do all those things. And while those are great, my message is much deeper than that. And I really want to help women find their true passion and purpose in life. So, and the best way to do that is through your body, because as Elliot talks about, your body is your mind is your body. And when you have a healthy, well-nourished body, it's much easier to take care of yourself in all areas of your life, your relationships, your career. And when you're just focusing on overall wellness, with everything from your nutrition to working out in a way that feels good for you, not just because some fitness industry professional tells you should do it this way, and you're following your purpose and you have hobbies and interests you enjoy and you're having confidence in your relationship and your career, that's what's important to me. And that's the message that I want to spread to women, that it's okay to be confident. It's okay to show up as the fullest version of yourself and not have to shrink down and become smaller because that's what society says is pretty, but to show up in your fullness and to have confidence not only in your body, but in every area of your life.
Absolutely. And I think there's an interesting and very much needed trek of messaging that's starting to really come up in the fitness industry, especially for the ladies, and that is, hold the phone. What is the whole point of what we're doing here?
Yeah.
And it's something that is very refreshing to see because, like I was relating to you, when I was coming up, a lot of the more popular approaches and the messaging that I was getting as it related to fitness did not really appeal to me at all. And it took me a little while to find something that did. But
Mm,
once I did, it was 110% full go. And
right.
a lot of that kind of still came down to respecting the wisdom that is inherent in your body. And
Right.
that means different things to different people, and that can be expressed in different ways. But ultimately, it's all about how, health and fitness should all be about, well, what is I guess you could say, the most optimal way of doing whatever it is that you're going to do in health and fitness that's ultimately going to give you a better life.
Right.
And that can be easily disrespected
Oh,
in
yeah.
the whole fitness industry,
Oh,
if you
yeah.
will.
Well, and the thing about the fitness industry is that sex sells, like whether we like it or not, whether we want to talk about these deep messages and the deep meaning of confidence and finding your purpose, like sex is what sells, unfortunately. And so that's why I struggled for so long with being so strong in my message is because it's much more, I guess it's like easier and more appealing to just resort to posting pictures of like your abs and your butt and yourself and like getting all these followers and all these likes, but you're never really reaching people on a deeper level. But I think what's most important to me now is staying true to my message. And whether I reach 10 people or I reach 100, at least I've reached 10, and they're getting the true message of what I think is what the fitness industry needs to hear is that it's okay to love yourself now while still working for what you want. Because I know from personal experience that it's not like you get to this end goal where you finally hit a PR or you finally are at this goal weight and then all of a sudden life is hunky dory and magical and you have no more problems. If you don't learn to appreciate and enjoy the journey along the way, as cliche as that sounds, it's so true because you're never going to get to this point where it's okay. Because then you're going to want more and you're going to want more. You're going to want to lift heavier. You're going to want to be smaller. It's never going to be good enough unless you realize it's good enough right now.
Absolutely. It's where it's coming from that counts.
Yeah, exactly. And your motivation behind it too. Because if your motivation is just, working out because somebody says that you should work out or somebody says muscles are cool now or somebody says powerlifting is the way to go, but you're not passionate about any of those things, you're not going to stay motivated for the long run, which is why you see so many people yo-yo dieting and hopping from program to program, or maybe they try powerlifting and then they go to Olympic weightlifting and then they want to do bodybuilding and they want to do all this stuff, which there's nothing wrong with trying different things, but you're never going to see amazing results unless you stick with one thing for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're missing the point is the consistency.
Yeah. And it's very hard to stay consistent
Mm-hmm.
with anything that is not in alignment with your true self. Whether you
Oh,
want
yeah.
to whether you want to consider that your physical or physiological self, your
Yeah.
mental, spiritual self, if there's a disconnect, really it's hopeless.
Right. I have a perfect example. Can I just tell you a quick story?
Please.
Okay. So, just in alignment with what you just said, when something is not spiritually aligned with what you're trying to do with your body. So, this was actually back in November of this past year. So, like I just said, I'm all about nurturing your body, loving your body, moving in a way that feels good, blah, blah, blah. I had been watching so many YouTube videos, and I'll go into a point about why it's important to be mindful of not only what you're consuming when it comes to food, but also the media that you're consuming and the YouTube videos you're watching, the podcasts you're consuming, how sensitive we are to those things without really realizing it. So in November, I was watching all these YouTube videos about like tracking macros and all this stuff when before I was so over that. I was like, okay, there was a point in my life where I was so meticulous with my macros and I had shifted away from that into a more intuitive eating style where I was just listening to my body, eating when I was hungry, just honoring like my own fullness and satiety cues, all that. And because I was watching so many videos and seeing everybody on Instagram competing in bikini shows and doing all this stuff, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Like, that's what I need to do to be respected as a coach in the fitness industry. I'm just going to diet down. I'm going to hire a coach. And I did. That's what I did. I hired a coach and I was paying her a stupid amount of money every month to get me in bikini show shape. And it wasn't until January when Mark got stuck in Canada where we kind of had to take a big look at everything. That was when I had that whole soul searching session and evaluate what am I doing in my life? Like, is this really my path and what I want to do? And when I tell you my mission was to help women find what they love and feel comfortable in their own skin and not have to shrink down, but to show up in their fullest expression. And that's what I knew in my heart. But here I am on the other side, training to shrink myself down and starving myself and doing all this stuff. I was like, what are you doing? That's so out of alignment with what you feel spiritually and what your message is. And to anybody who's listening who competes in bodybuilding, I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. It just wasn't for me. And it took Mark getting stuck in another country and me sitting down and having a real, like, what are you doing, girl, conversation with myself to realize that I was so influenced, even in a positive way. You know, that's a good goal to have, is to like work really hard to compete at something. But it wasn't what I was meant to do. But I was so wrapped up in like the whole, you know, comparing myself to people on social media and thinking that's what I needed to do in order to be appreciated and valued as a coach and be successful. Like, I'm not successful unless I have abs, which logically I know all these things are not true at all. But when you're consuming so much of that culture and the diet culture and the bodybuilding culture, you can't help but want to do it too, because you think like that's the ticket, that's the ticket to success. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was just a prime example of when you're doing something because you think, or somebody tells you you should do it, or that's a cool thing to do, that's what's trendy, but you're not really in alignment with it in your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes it. Yeah, again, you hit it right on the head. It's how you're fertilizing the thoughts in your mind.
Hmm.
And again, that's why stuff like meditation, like you mentioned, getting away to a beach house for a couple
Yeah.
days is so important because your mind is always grasping, taking things in. And if
Right.
you're always giving it stuff to take in that may or may not be really in your best interest,
Yeah.
well, it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and something new that I'm coming into too is I used to be very gung ho. Like when people would come to me, I'd be like, okay, strength training and whatever, like these are the best things to do. And while I still believe that strength training is key to success, if somebody comes to me and wants to work with me, but they love running, let's say, okay, yeah, running, let's say, is not steady state cardio, is not the best for fat loss. It's not the best way to, build muscle and all of that. But if it's what you love, who am I to tell you, no, I'm going to make you strength train and this is the best way for you, you know? And I've had to come to terms with that as a coach, to be flexible enough to accommodate what people actually love so they're more likely to stick with it long term, as opposed to trying to like shove my beliefs down their throat about what I think is best for them, because I'm not them. So who am I to tell them? You know, like as a coach, I think it's very important for us to give recommendations based on our experience and knowledge and what we know is the best to give somebody results, especially if they come in with no prior knowledge. But if I have somebody who's like a marathon runner who wants to come in and just maybe get a little bit stronger, tone up, which is what the ladies like to call it, tone instead of build muscle, because that's gross, toning is the way. Then yeah, we'll find a way to make a plan that would work to incorporate things you love while still, maybe adding a little weights here and there. But if you love running, run. If you love Zumba, do Zumba. Whatever you're going to stick with for the long term, don't listen to what anybody else says you should do. Just do what you're going to do consistently and set goals for yourself and stick with it. It's as simple as that. But people like to overcomplicate things and think there's one size fits all and this one thing is going to be the holy grail that's going to get you all the results. But it's just consistency with anything over a long period of time.
Yeah. Well, that is the sign of a great coach because we are not walking anatomy books.
Yeah.
And regardless of what maybe the average person might say when, they might, seek out coaching, if all they really wanted to do was to, whatever the case may be, build the muscle, lose the 5 pounds. Well,
Hmm.
then, it's not exactly rocket science.
Right.
That might be blasphemy for a quote unquote strength and conditioning or fitness professional or whatever else you want to call me. But let's be honest. It's 2017. Anything that's ever been written about fitness is, well, it's on the internet.
Right.
There's google.com if you haven't heard of it. Anything that you might want to know is
Yeah.
probably there.
Yeah.
Something that really, I see it coming about a little bit more, but something that even really needs to be, I believe, even more embodied in the fitness industry, I think, from conscious coaches, is not necessarily learning more and more and more and more from your anatomy book
No.
or your your NASA manual, for
Right.
God's sakes. It's about what are you going to do as a coach to help somebody find a way to express themselves physically
Right.
in a way that's going to ultimately behoove their life.
Right. I think the missing factor for coaching is behavior change. And a lot of people don't take into account the mindset. I think more coaches are starting to do it now. But the mindset and learning how to help a client change their behavior by making small changes and not trying to change everything and completely overhaul your whole lifestyle at once. I think that's key in helping clients get long term success because I know from experience, like when I first started coaching, I was so naive. I was like, we're going to change everything. You're going to start sleeping 8 hours a night. You're going to drink 2 gallons of water a day, or, just whatever that you should be doing. That's somebody who, even as a professional, like an athlete and a coach, they don't even do all the things on their best days. So, how do we expect these people who are starting from scratch, drinking soda every day, sitting for 9 out of the 12 hours they're awake, to completely overhaul their life and expect to change? That's why they program hop, because they think this is so overwhelming and they do really well at it for a week or two, but you can't sustain that level of drastic change for longer than 2 weeks without driving yourself absolutely crazy. And then people start feeling like there's something wrong with them. They're like, oh, it must be me. Like, I just can't stick to anything. I'm not a dedicated person. But it's like, no, you went from eating 3,000 calories a day to 900. So, of course, you're hungry and of course, you're going to want to overeat. And you went from, just not moving at all to working out 6 days a week. Of course, it's not sustainable and you're going to get burnt out, which is why you see the gym is empty in March after 5,000 new people start January 1st as their New Year's resolution. So, I think as unsexy as moderation is and balance and easing your way into things, because people want results and they want them fast. We live in an instant gratification society. It's like if you can learn to have patience and you can learn to kind of just ease into the progress and the change that you're trying to make, whether it be, your diet or your fitness, or most people want to do it all at once, but just slowly start introducing things into your life and changing the so-called negative habits that you have one by one. Like, don't feel like you need to overhaul it all at one time,
Yeah.
because the best way to get results is by, again, consistency, sticking to something for a long period of time. So
Yeah. Yeah. And, it really, again, it goes back to speaking and coaching to the entire person. Because
mm,
we have a logical side and we have somewhat of a, I don't want to call it illogical, but it's
right.
deeper than logic.
Yeah.
So,
Can I ask you a question?
oh,
Am
for
I allowed
sure.
to ask a question on the podcast?
By all
So
means.
when when you have coaching clients, how is it that you incorporate kind of more the mental aspect into things? So say you just said you like to work with mind and body. So the body is the obvious part where it's like, okay, we're going to teach you how to use kettlebells and we're going to put you on a nutrition plan and all this stuff. But when it comes to more of the mental habit change and the, just overall wellness side of things, how do you implement that with your clients?
Well, if I had any semblance of a good system with it, then, well, I'd probably be a millionaire at this point. I'm well on my way, and I'd like to think that over the course of time, I'm finding out how to do that
Mm,
better. I would be the first to admit it is exponentially more difficult, at least for me, to facilitate that sort of change. But what I can say, I think it starts with a couple things. One is I try to be very careful with the messages that I put out,
Mm,
so that first of all, I'm not contributing in any sort of way to a thought process that I'm not in alignment with.
right.
So that's got to be, I think, the first part of it, because monkey see, monkey do, and no
Hmm.
matter what, there's going to be some sort of subconscious absorption of whatever you know energy that you're putting out, other people are
Right.
getting in. So first of all, I try to be very meticulous with what I say it, how I'm presenting myself. I think that's how it's got to start. Uh, be the change that you want to see in the world. I saw
Hmm.
written on a
Reach
bathroom wall one time. So,
those bathroom wall
oh
inspirations.
yeah. But I think something maybe a little bit more tactical is I very much encourage meditation
Mm,
and any sort of mindfulness practice that might simultaneously help to clear the mind and techniques to focus the mind.
right.
So I think those would be two places to start.
Yeah, I think meditation, just a side note, because when I first started meditating, it was so hard for me to meditate because I thought meditation was just sitting there, not thinking anything, and just like, it wasn't acceptable if a thought popped up and whatever. And admittedly, I'm not the best at meditation. Like, I try to meditate every day, but I don't do it religiously every day. But meditation to me has turned into it's manifested in many more things than just sitting there. Meditation to me is taking a walk in nature. Okay, meditation to me is taking a yoga class where I'm completely present and I'm not thinking about my to-do list. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to make for lunch or dinner. I'm not thinking about all the problems that I have, all the work I need to do, all this stuff. Meditation for me has become just a mindfulness practice where whatever gets me into that flow state to me is meditation. Well, so that might not seem like meditation in the traditional sense, but if somebody is listening and they're overwhelmed or think meditation's woo woo, it doesn't have to be this like grandiose sit on a pillow and, put your hands in little whatever and never think a thought and sit there for an hour. It can be as little as 5 minutes sitting there by yourself, just trying to be present and focusing on your breath. It can be going for a walk. It can be anything that you make it. It can be, adult coloring books are a huge thing now. And I got one actually, and it is the best thing ever because it's something that engages my mind, but I can just like zone out and color. Like, as childish and silly as that may seem to some people, it's better for me than sitting there and scrolling on social media and, filling my subconscious mind with all this crap that's like so contrary to what I believe or want to see. So yeah, it can be whatever you make it.
Absolutely. Just like we were talking about with what do you got to do for your exercise? Well, there's what is optimal on paper, and there's what is actually going to work with a living, breathing human being.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
something that's helped me so much staying present and mindful and kind of staying on my own path. Like, my newest motto is stay in your own lane because I find that even when it comes to business, when I look at what everybody else is doing around me, like the way people are making videos and the type of blog posts people are writing, it drains my creativity. I'm not able to be as creative. I don't have original ideas. I'm just like, okay, well, she wrote about this, so maybe I should write about that. And, you're just comparing yourself to other people. So what I did, kind of going back to me deciding not to compete in that bikini show, one of the things I started doing was being much more mindful of the media that I'm consuming. So I went through my YouTube because I love YouTube. I could sit there and watch videos all the time. I'd watch them while I was like walking and just driving even. But I unfollowed a lot of people on there that while I still love them and I appreciate them, I respect their work, I think they're awesome people, it just was not good for me to constantly look at them either because I was comparing myself to them in a physical way or in like a business standpoint, like why am I not there yet when I should be? I feel like I should be at that point. So if I went through my Instagram feed and my YouTube feed and I came across anybody that made me feel some sort of way that just wasn't in alignment with my highest path and who I want to become, I unfollowed them. And I felt bad because I was like, oh, I hope people don't see this and think I'm like rude. But I mean, these are huge accounts. It's not like my friends that I unfollowed. And now I just try to follow people that, speak truth. And like you said, people put out vibes. So I know that sounds like super woo woo, but when I read something and it just seems like somebody's forcing a caption or faking it, or they like post a butt selfie with like an inspirational quote, I'm like, this doesn't resonate with me. Like, I don't look at that. I don't look at a picture of abs and I'm like, wow, now I'm so motivated to get in the gym and kill it. So I'm like, why am I even following these people? I think you have to be sensitive to not only the food you're consuming, but the media that you're consuming too, because people don't realize how much of an effect that has on your overall mental health and well-being. Because we're exposed to, we're watching YouTube videos or we're listening to podcasts or we're scrolling on Facebook, Instagram for hours and hours a day. And if you're constantly surrounding yourself with things that make you feel less than you are, then what is that? Of course, it's going to lead you to less self-confidence and feeling like you suck. So yeah, my biggest recommendation to my clients, to anybody listening to this, to myself even, is just quit with all the stuff that drains you. Even if you really like somebody, but you find yourself comparing or wishing you had their life or their body or whatever, that's just not the best way to spend your time.
Absolutely. More sage advice. Yeah. Yeah, and again, that feeds right back into the idea of trusting your instincts, trusting your intuition, because the stuff that's on the screen, that's not coming from within. That's nonsense. So, yeah, if you're engaged in something that allows you to be mindful, allows your mind to work in the way that it probably wants to, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, then you really start getting in touch with some things that make your decision-making process, your motivation, everything else, maybe not necessarily far easier, but aligning yourself in such a way that the progress that you see is taking you further into being more and more of your authentic self and not in another direction, which sooner or later will catch up with you and will manifest in some not so great ways.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing too. Elliot talks a lot about Elliot's the guy who owns Strength Camp. I think people know that by now. Um, he talks a lot about how when something is going on internally, it will manifest in your physical body. So one of the key ways that I knew that my path in St. Pete was not in alignment with what I wanted to do long term was the fact I think that I kept getting physically ill. So because I was like suppressing my intuition and just not listening, despite I knew I should be moving on and doing other things, I stayed against my better intuition and my wisdom. But I didn't know this. Like, this is not something, of course, hindsight is 2020. I can look back and say, oh, that's why I'm getting sick. But I didn't know. But at the time, there was one time where 2 weeks in a row, I was violently sick, like throwing up. And I'm not sick often because I eat really well, I move, and I'm healthy. But looking back, it's like, hello, those are, the mental things that you're carrying in your body that show up as physical manifestations. So when people are getting sick often or they feel run down all the time, they're really tired, like that's just emotional baggage that you could be holding on to. Like, I know that's getting more into the woo-woo side of things. But yeah, I really honestly believe that it will manifest itself physically in your body. And it's funny, I think about this now. I went to a yoga class today and they were saying how you hold a lot of tension in your hips. So the teacher said once that when you do hip stretches, like you do the pigeon stretch or something, some people will actually feel like an emotional release as well, because that's an area where when you have tight hips, people tend to store a lot of their stress and tension in there. So like she said, people have actually cried when they're doing like pigeon, or you just feel this overwhelming sense of release. And I was like, wow, that's so crazy, because that's literally what Elliot teaches. And some people say that he's so far like woo woo that it's not even relevant. And I'm sure it's hard to prove that scientifically, but I really do think there's some validity in that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, people will always have opinions, but you never really know until you know.
Hmm.
And you don't know until you experience certain things.
Right. Yeah, and I think like going back to the meditation and the mindfulness thing, I don't think there's anything wrong with numbing out. Like if you've had a really long day where you're mentally engaged at work all day, okay, coming home and watching a TV show is not the worst thing in the world, just zoning out because I love TV too. It's not like I'm this, sit there and meditate all day long, but when 99.9% of your life is spent doing things that numb you, people either numb themselves through watching TV, scrolling through Instagram and Facebook, drugs, food, alcohol, sex, whatever it is, and you're never actually feeling anything at all because you're always trying to numb out to suppress those feelings. I think that's when it becomes the problem, and that's when the physical manifestations occur. I don't think it's just like, oh, you're stressed today and you didn't meditate, you're going to get sick tomorrow, or you're going to have tight hips and cry. I think it's just like a compound effect over a long period of time when you're just constantly suppressing your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, we could talk for days.
Days.
But I think this would be about as good of a time as any to wrap up. So tell us, if I was to go to juliebooher.com, which I'm just about to, what services do you offer to those who may be interested in pursuing what you've got?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of creating a flagship program, which will include everything from fitness to health to the mindfulness that we just talked about. I'm still fleshing out the details, so I don't want to say too much. But if people go to juliebooher.com/newsletter and they sign up for my newsletter list, they'll also get my free ebook, which is 5 ways to start living a life you're obsessed with. And it's completely free to sign up for. And I will update you as the flagship program is launched. Currently, I have online coaching clients, and I'm not taking on any more at the moment. But like I said, if you just go to my newsletter and sign up, I send out emails every single week, and you will be the first to know when something does come up.
Awesome. Well, we will be sure to include that link and everything else that we talked about in the show notes page. And
Perfect.
Julie, again, I want to say, first of all, thank you very much for sharing, for relating some of your story, and for allowing me to break the ice with your first podcast.
My first podcast. Woo. Oh yeah, maybe like when my podcast is launched, because Zach has convinced me to get a podcast, then that will be available via my newsletter too. But yeah, thank you, Zach. This was an awesome conversation. So I'm really happy that you had me on here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. And we will talk soon. Alrighty, well, that does it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Julie. If you would like to learn more, you can check out the show notes page at zachhenderson.com/Julie. Until next time, here's to your strength.